everybody, members of the Local Plan Subcommittee for this meeting, 11th of December. Good evening to those of you in the audience and to anybody watching via the Council's YouTube channel. I will start with apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Finkin, who is substituted by Councillor Diamond. Apologies from Councillor Tom Cunningham, substituted by Councillor Schweer. Councillor Walsh, I believe, is coming along this evening. So, yes, I think he's possibly just running a little late. So that's that. Item 2, declarations of interest. Could I please have any declarations for disclosable pecuniary interest or other registrable interest relating to items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct or taken advice? Councillor Coleridge.
Thank you, Chair. Having taken advice, I would like to declare that I am the ward member for Hatfield Peveril as some of the items in agenda item 5. For transparency, I would like to declare that I've been copied into correspondence with Hatfield Peveril Parish Council in my role as ward member, and I also know one of the registered speakers this evening, Parish Councillor Renault. I have not responded to the correspondence, expressed any views or participate in any discussion in relation to these sites. I will therefore remain for this item, participate in the debate and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Coleridge. No other declarations? Fine. Oh, sorry, Councillor Abbott. Sorry.
Well, again, for total transparency and in very similar light, the Silver End site's come back. That was due to be discussed at Silver End Parish Council last night. I left the room as soon as they said they got to that item. I was asked by a parish councillor about why it had come back, and I explained the process, but nothing beyond that.
Fine. Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Okay. Item 3, minutes of previous meetings. I have 2 sets. I'll just deal with the 20th of October first. They have all been circulated. Unless anybody has any comments, could I have a mover and seconder? Move, Councillor Bowes-Flint. Seconder, Councillor Ritchie or Councillor Butland. And a quick show of hands on those, please. Thank you, members. I've just got something to say about the next set. Bear with me. So, the minutes for the 6th of November. Reading through these, the subject of Silver End Conservation Guide came up. I think I may have been a little hard on place services because having had an update from Chris Padgey, yes, we are waiting for drawings for the designs for doors and windows. Now, originally, place services said they did not have the capacity within their team. I can understand that. And they would have to source that out to an external body. That was going to cost this authority quite a lot of money. However, they then came back and said actually they did have somebody within the team who can do that. So the cost to us was about half, which is good. The downside is it would take a little longer, but we've accepted that. So that's why the drawings are not yet ready. I think they won't be too long. They may not be ready this side of Christmas, and of course we're only a couple of weeks away now. So I think I was a little harsh on place services. As soon as those drawings are ready, there will be, the intention is to have a meeting between the Parish Council, Heritage Society, ward councillors and officers to show them the drawings before it goes out to public consultation. So I just wanted to make that clear, because it does say in the minutes I had agreed to chase the county member as to why it was taking so long. So I'm not going to do that because I understand now why there is a delay. So I hope that's clear. Are there any other comments on the minutes for the 6th of November? And if not, could I again have a mover and seconder? Councillor Bowes-Flint. Seconder, Councillor Coleridge. Quick show of hands, please. Thank you, members. Right, I'll just give that to you, Alison. Thank you very much. Okay. Right, members, agenda item 4, public question time. We have 4 speakers this evening. I will just say a number of other people asked to speak, which I in consultation with governance, did not agree to. We don't have that many rules about public question time, but one rule is that any item you're going to speak on has to be an item on the agenda. A number of speakers wanted to refer to specific sites which are not up for discussion this evening. So I said no to those, but I would just point out again, and I'm happy to go on doing this, we will be launching the Regulation 18 public consultation in February. That is a very good route for anybody, whether you are a resident, agent, landowner, parish councillor or ward councillor, to put your comments in on any of the sites that have been discussed. That's a formal route to go down, and all those comments will be collated and looked at. So I wouldn't want anybody to think that, you know, this is their only opportunity to make a comment. All right? So I'm going to ask everybody to come forward in turn now, starting with Councillor Anne Hooks, please. As usual, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I want to make a brief statement on the housing trajectory and buffers and windfall assumptions before us tonight. As a council, we all share the same concern, the exceptionally high level of housing the government has directed towards Braintree District. And we all share the same responsibility to ensure that our local plan includes the right level of projected housing so it is robust at inspection, without exposing our communities to unnecessary or excessive development. The reality is that this is a politically driven housing target, not one based on genuine local need. By fully allocating it, we risk a permanent loss of the district's character, our farmland, our landscapes and the qualities that make this area so special, while further straining infrastructure that is already at breaking point. The credible paper recently shared with members makes this even clearer. It highlights how the impact is being exacerbated by an overlarge buffer, a very conservative trajectory and an extremely cautious windfall assumptions. The inspector at the last examination gave significant weight to this author's evidence, so the points should be not brushed aside. I have huge respect for our officers, but the briefing note does not, in my view, fully address the implications of what has been raised. At the very least, we should be reviewing our windfall assumptions now and ensuring that there is no unnecessary uplift built into either the buffer or the trajectory. Treating a windfall review as merely as a backup option, I feel, is not appropriate. It should be undertaken regardless, because a more accurate windfall position strengthens both the plan and our ongoing supply tests. Our task is to produce a sound local plan without overburdening or damaging the district for generations. Officers will rightly guide us on technical matters, but it is this committee's role to ensure that all perspectives have been considered and we strike the right balance. I fully accept that we must allocate enough to satisfy government requirements, but the risk here is that we over-allocate by a significant margin when a different and equally valid interpretation of the numbers suggests that far less may actually be required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooks. I should have said, members, I think under declarations of interest, I'll declare a joint interest on behalf of all of us for Councillor Hooks and also Councillors Dervish and Garrett, who are all speaking tonight and who are known to us all as district councillors. I've got to say that. Right.
Could you check with Councillor Walsh that he has any interest?
Oh, Councillor Walsh, good evening. Do you have any declarations of interest?
I don't. Apologies, Roadworks.
That's okay. That's fine. Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor Mike Renaud from Hatfield Peveril Parish Council. Yes, yep, that's it. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members. The Parish Council at Hatfield Peveril have recently reviewed and made their neighbourhood plan, which will significantly exceed the access housing need up to 2028, for which delivery of key infrastructure is still required: A12 widening, health and education services. A coalescent safeguarding zone was adopted outside the northern A12. Government's planning and infrastructure bill drive the push for new homes, recognise the roles of NDPs, the importance of the house enhanced protections provided and the voice of local communities regarding development. There is clear intent not to ignore or override them. There is also a golden rule in respect of Greenbelt that there must be required infrastructure and public services, health, education and transport in place. The small green gap containing drainage infrastructure associated with the proposed allocation does nothing to create the feeling of leaving one place and entering another, being hard up against the built edge of Witham. Anglia Water state to have infrastructure challenges relating to increased demand for waste removal and wastewater provision for the Hatfield Peveril district. There have been a number of service outages in Hatfield Peveril to substantiate this. Replacing upgrading old and worn out pipes is required. Train stations and presumption to approve appears to be driving the allocation. Parish Council believes the focus on a well-connected train station is an incorrect interpretation of the government's intention. Housing Secretary, 18th November 25, it has to be the right homes and nearby transport links are a vital part. You've got stations around our great cities and towns where public transport is already in place, within 15 minutes walk of a well-connected station. Hatfield Peveril is not a town or a city. Hatfield 2193 is 800 metres from the station. This will be a 12-minute walk. It's physically impossible for almost 900 homes to be built within a 15-minute walk of the station. The station is not well connected. It is largely unmanaged, has limited parking, no bus or taxi service. There's only an hourly service, rising to 2 in each direction in weekday rush hours. It lacks step-free access, has little by way of amenities. A12 widening funding act cancellation lost an upgrade to a vital transport link. There is no current alternative plan tabled. Over the last 5 years, the population of the village has grown through both planned and speculative housing development from 4,500 to 6,500. These additional allocations seek to add a further 1123 dwellings, the entirety of the new central government request for the district. There remain significant constraints in terms of provision of education, primary health care, which pre-existed the recent additions. We are beyond saturation point. These are not referenced in the 3-site allocation assessments or recommendations. Build and the infrastructure will follow is again shown to be a hollow fantasy. Parish Council are fully supportive of the Braintree Planning Act recommendation of 5th of June 25 in respect of Hatfield Peveril sites tabled. We are not supportive of the 3 here. It's understood that the leader of Braintree Council favours New Garden community west of Braintree to Stansted Airport, rail, M25 and employment opportunities. Hatfield Peveril supports this view and respectfully suggests the tabled capacity of 1,123 need of a central government target be addressed through this approach and not only via Hatfield Peveril. We believe Braintree's approach with these submissions is fundamentally flawed, lacks objective assessment, does not consider the wider needs of Essex resulting from A12 cancellation and weighs heavily against Hatfield Peveril. They proverbially throw Hatfield Peveril existing and new residents under the bus. Thank you for your time.
Councillor Rennie, thank you. I know you did scale back your original statement. Councillor Butland.
Chairman, can I just correct thing? I was very much in favour of a new garden community west of Braintree. That was last time around, and it's not been something which has been brought forward on this occasion. And that was when we were working with the other 2 authorities as well as part of the 3 garden communities. So I'd just like to correct that.
Yes.
On this occasion, it hasn't come forward. If it had have come forward, I might well support it, but it's not on the table. It never has been on the table on this occasion.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Councillor Butland. I think that's a good clarification. Thank you. Right, my next speaker is Councillor Charlie Dervish, who's speaking on the Hatfield Peveril items and is the ward member.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chairman.
Good evening.
Thank you, councillors. Whilst I do not object totally with the sites on the agenda this evening for Hatfield Peveril, as I understand the need for this council to fulfil central government's requirements for housing numbers, I must object to these sites being considered without any plans for future infrastructure. As this committee is aware, Hatfield Peveril has been the subject of many development sites, such as the Arla site, Glen Eagles, Stonepath Meadow, Small Acres, and soon to commence Malden Road. These developments have created a severe increase in traffic. The doctor's surgery is closed to new patients and has been for a number of years now. And the school was oversubscribed this September, with many of the new residents being sent to Turling Primary School and schools in Witham. The section of the A12 through Hatfield Peveril has seen a 150% increase in fatal accidents in the last 12 months. And now government has cancelled the A12 widening. There are no plans for this to be addressed or plans for its improvements. I note the officer's comments that Hatfield Peveril is a sustainable village with rail networks. The latter I do not disagree with, but the sustainable I do disagree with. Hatfield Peveril cannot cope with a further 1,000 homes. It already is at breaking point. I urge this committee to consider infrastructure, healthcare needs and education over Labour government's policy of build, build, build. Improvements to services first and then consider further sites. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dervish. And last speaker this evening is Councillor Diana Garrod, who's speaking on the Sturmer sites as a ward member.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Good evening, everyone. This council commissioned a settlement fringe study for its evidence base to assess areas around main towns. Sturmer sits next to Haverhill but is entirely within the Dedham Vale area of outstanding natural beauty project area, but was excluded from the study. The council identifies the site as the Stour River Valley and Bumpstead Farmland Plateau. The LFS states that elevated land, prominent slopes on valley sides, are considered high susceptibility. It also assesses open plateau, openness to public view, and in particular skylines, parcels of land which are sited on prominent or distinctive skyline. Whilst you see this site on a flat piece of paper, it overlooks the Haverhill industrial zone with several major chemical and biological process industries. It includes the very tall Kalina Distribution Centre, which can be seen on the skyline nearly 2 miles away. This development would sit at a higher point above Kalina and would irreversibly change the skyline of this valued landscape forever, and would be at odds with this council's planning policies. West Suffolk have listed it in their site emission report 2024, and as stated by officers here, it would attract an objection from the Suffolk Authority, making this an unsafe allocation to the local plan. Suffolk says that an urban expansion here would be contrary to the Suffolk LCA's key characteristics and would be visually prominent within the landscape. The landscape backdrop and setting would therefore become lost, and built form becomes visually intrusive on the skyline over greater distances. Additionally, their sustainability assessment identifies irreplaceable loss of Grade 2 agricultural land. In July 2024, this council carried a motion, I quote, "This council recognises that this district is one of the most productive and cereal growing regions in the country, and that the agricultural sector contributes sustainably to our local economy. This council recognises the importance of maintaining our nation's food security and the role that farmers in our district play in feeding the nation and protecting and enhancing the countryside. This council will ensure that its policies are conscious of the need to maintain food security." Are the words of this council empty? This is excellent, productive Grade 2 arable land on a plateau overlooking an industrial area containing chemical industry and a distribution centre working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Is this really the right place for a large housing settlement? It would also surround the Grade 1 Saxon Church and Saxon Burial Mound, which is of immense historical importance, where one of Boudicca's generals is said to be buried. The site may therefore be lobbied for extensive architectural excavation. In terms of transport and connectivity, there is none. Haverhill doesn't even have a dual carriageway closer than 12 miles. The A1307 to Cambridge is appropriately named the Road of Death. Again, this is at odds with the policies. There are no nearby rail links. Essex doesn't provide any healthcare services whatsoever in the Bumpstead ward. Haverhill is at bursting point. Sturmer suffers from regular flooding from runoff from this site, and of course rising of the River Stour would exacerbate flooding downstream in the Braintree district. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Garrod. That finishes the public question time. Members, I'm going to swap around the two main items on the agenda. and go next to general progress update, which is coming from Sarah, because I think it would be helpful for members to have that first before we consider the additional site allocations. Right, so we will go to agenda item 6. Sarah, please.
Thank
Are you all right, Councillor Belsman? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Since the previous local plan meeting held on the 6th of November, officers have provided a briefing note in relation to the housing target, the buffer and the trajectory, and progressed the highways modelling work with Essex County Council. For context, this is the table put in the briefing note showing the trajectory as it is currently. This meeting, we're asking members to consider allocating a further housing in the region of 1,100 homes in order to finalise our preferred spatial option. This is important as there are a number of evidence-based documents which need to be completed which are dependent on this being confirmed. This includes the infrastructure delivery plan, the water cycle study and the sustainability appraisal. Members are reminded that the housing target is now a minimum expectation within national planning policy. There is no maximum limit to this. The district has no significant constraints such as green belts, national landscape, national park, heritage coastline, etc., as defined by footnote 7 of paragraph 11 in the NPPF to justify any shortfall from the minimum housing target. Members should also bear in mind the fact that the standard housing method is reviewed on a 6-monthly basis and can increase if housing affordability rates worsen. In fact, since the target was introduced, it was at a level of 1,116 and it's already increased to 1,149 per annum. And that will continue to be something we have to take into account up until the point where we submit. Officers' advice on the housing target, the housing trajectory and the buffer, and the recommendation to allocate further sites is informed by legal advice from Council and advice from DAC Planning, who have carried out a critical friend review of the local plan review project. The report from DAC Planning is expected to be provided next week. However, initial advice provided at the workshop that we've had with them is that a minimum of 10% as a buffer is required and that any reduction would increase the risk of the local plan being found unsound. Land promoters of the emission sites will challenge the housing land supply and a reduced buffer increases the risk to the plan. In terms of the trajectory, it's acknowledged that developments are not shown to begin until 2031, 2032 in terms of delivery, which might be considered conservative. However, any allocation would need to obtain planning permission and undertake comprehensive master planning before sites can begin to deliver. Regard should be given to Straits Mill and Hayswood, which were allocated in the existing plan, and Panfield Lane, which was initially allocated within the 2011 core strategy and are yet to deliver any housing on any of these sites, which is evidence that large sites are slower to come forward. Land promoters of the emission sites will challenge any trajectory which is over-optimistic, and therefore officers are showing a trajectory which is realistic. Further, the infrastructure delivery plan, the IDP, and water cycle study evidence-based work is ongoing and will inform the trajectory further. Any significant infrastructure need may impact the trajectory as currently proposed even further, and therefore increasing the delivery rates or completions starting earlier within this is not recommended at this time. As set out within the report for item 5, officers do consider a review of the windfall allowance to be possible. However, this work will need to be undertaken over the next few months until there is sufficient evidence to support a higher windfall allowance which has been checked and interrogated by officers. The recommendation is to continue to use the 75 homes per year allowance, which has been tested through the core strategy examination, the section 2 examination, and through planning appeals. It's tested regularly through speculative application planning appeals. So, it is something to bear in mind. The 5-year land supply is not fixed at any moment in time. It is constantly attacked through the appeal process. In terms of updating members on the highways evidence base, ECC have confirmed they will be delivering the information required to carry out a Regulation 18 consultation. This includes the VIS-UM modelling up to the end of December 2025, focusing on 3 scenarios, which are the reference case, i.e. What would happen to traffic without any local plan development, The local plan preferred spatial option, which sets out business as usual based on the preferred spatial option that we're giving to the Highway Authority, and a version with mode sensitivity, which will show a degree of modal shift. Whilst the Regulation 18 consultation is being carried out, further work will be carried out in the form of a highway impact assessment of alternative options. I would just highlight that the report will also not include consideration of specific transport mitigation, as this isn't required for a Regulation 18 consultation. So in summary, the evidence base will include a stage 1 and 2 report, which covers the sustainable accessibility appraisal of the latest preferred option and 2 alternative options. So just to remind you of what that this is the first option 1 is the current preferred option. So in all the scenarios for the spatial options, the small sites remain the same. The only changes to the large sites. So the top one is Kingsdean, Halstead and East Braintree and Windfall. Option 2 tests Kingsdean, East Braintree, Coggeshall and south of Haverhill in accessibility terms. And all the small sites remain the same. And option 3 tests Andrewsfield, Patterswick and Hatfield Peveril, and all the small sites remain the same. So the stage 1 and 2 report will cover those 3 options, plus a review of existing network conditions, a review of existing Essex and Braintree transport strategies and policies, and a high-level indication of typical mitigation costs and funding routes. The evidence base will also include the preferred spatial option highway impact modelling report, which covers the strategic modelling of the preferred spatial option and the sensitivity test. It will cover the methodology, assumptions, findings and conclusions. We recognise what has been said about needing to mitigate the highway's impact arising from the development. This work will be central to the evidence developed to support the Regulation 19 consultation, as that's when it's required. In terms of the local plan review project overall, the initial advice from DAC Planning recognises the challenge of the local plan timetable. In particular, it highlights the short amount of time between Regulation 18 and Regulation 19 consultations, and the short amount of time between the end of the Regulation 19 consultation and the submission of the plan to the Planning Inspectorate. The timescales are significantly reduced in comparison to the previous local plans delivered by the team. The previous local plan Reg 18 consultation had just over 3,000 responses from 1,243 individuals or organisations, and it took the team around 6 weeks to process comments with additional staff support. We are expecting higher numbers of comments given the level of growth that's proposed within the draft plan and the increased use of social media, and we're currently looking to work on a plan to secure additional resource to support the team with this task. Members should also bear in mind that any new sites submitted through the consultation at Regulation 18 will need to be assessed and reported to committee, and if any sites raise issues and need removing from the draft plan, we will have to find and agree replacements with the local plan subcommittee. There are also significant dependencies within the production of the evidence base, including the further highway evidence, the more detailed infrastructure delivery plan, and the carrying out of the sustainability appraisal of the final plan before Regulation 19, post-Regulation 18, which could impact the timetable. Responses from statutory consultees may also require the Council to reconsider the draft strategy for growth, and significant changes could impact the timetable and require the Council to miss the Government's December 2026 deadline, but we are doing all we can to meet that at this time. So to conclude, it's just to recognise that the project's hugely challenging for both officers and members. Previously, for the local plan, the Reg 18 responses were reported to members over 10 meetings between October 2016 and July 2017. This is why we're investigating additional resource now. At this time, however, we're committing to do everything we can to meet the government's deadline in line with the timetable agreed by Local Plan Subcommittee. We recognise that the period from mid-May to July will be a significant challenge for both officers and members, as there will be a need to be decisive on the ways to address the comments made with regards to the draft plan. Should it not be possible for the Council to submit the plan for examination by December 2026, we would need to move to developing a new plan in line with the new 30-month plan system, which could be complicated by local government reorganisation. We do now have some information on the new plan-making system, and further guidance on this is expected in the spring, so officers will keep you updated on this. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much. I think it was certainly helpful to have that first. Members, anybody like to ask a question or make a comment? Councillor Bowers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. So, following on from that, Sarah, so the Stage 1 and Stage 2 report in regards to the highways modelling, are we getting that as a committee before the draft plan goes to full council before Reg 18, or is that, so, cause I think we've only got one of these meetings, so are we discussing those reports at this committee, and with those, and if that is the case, will those reports be circulated with the agenda so we've got enough time to consider them before the meeting? Thank you.
Yes, we're planning to report that to the 21st of January meeting alongside the draft local plan for agreement, and yes, all those papers will be circulated in advance of the meeting.
All right. Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, just a couple of questions at this stage, please, Madam Chairman. I think Sarah's presentation was very helpful in explaining the position on the windfall numbers, because I did struggle with that this afternoon. There's a figure in here about 225 dwellings, and I understand now what that means. That's assuming we went up to 100 for the next, up to the end of the plan period minus 2 years. I've brought my calculator with me, the very old one. My question is, given that we're bringing sites back which we previously didn't look at, and further to what Councillor Butland said, why are we not revisiting west of Braintree, or at least, as I suggested originally, part of it? That was originally recommended by officers. Now, I know it's not as large as the Garden, I never called them garden communities, Newtown proposal from the last local plan. But I just wonder why that hasn't come back in any shape or form.
Sarah?
So to answer that, I'd refer you to 1.7 of the item 5 report. The methodology we've used is we've gone back and revisited certain sites, the best available that have not yet included as a draft allocation, some in the north of the district in line with the previous discussion, others which are subject to speculative applications, or ones where more information has been provided by the promoter, or sites which are likely to be favourable based on plan changes to national policy. So that's the criteria we've used. Obviously, it's open to members to propose allocation of a previous site if that's what you would like to do.
You want to come
No,
back,
I'm not
Councillor?
proposing that. This,
Just querying it.
it's just a query, because I mean, if you look at the original officer recommendation numbers, that was in there as the anchor. Really, it was the single biggest provider, and I feel that ever since then we've been put in this position we're in now, where we're trying to make up the numbers, because I mean, my original suggestion was we went for a 2,000 there instead of 6. So, but if that's the reason, then I accept that.
Councillor Parker.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. That's clearly the timetable was extremely challenging. It hasn't got any less challenging, in fact, it's got more challenging. And there's an awful lot of work to be done on the evidence base by other bodies. Could you just explain to me what is the water cycle study? What does that look at?
Yeah, so the water cycle study, it basically looks at the proposed draft allocations in the plan, then it does an assessment of the existing water infrastructure in those areas. So it will look at catchments, what sewage treatment plants, things like that would be potentially impacted by an increase, what we refer to as headroom, caused by new development. So they'll look at that, they'll come up with a series of recommendations for what would need to be improved to help support that development. That study is conducted with the help of Anglia Water, Essex Suffolk Water, etc. So they feed into that as well, and it helps them plan their own water infrastructure provision. So yes, it basically shows us if there's any problems and what would be required for a development to what a development would be required to provide to make sure that that water infrastructure was in place to take that additional demand.
Thank you, Alan. Anybody else? No? Right, thank you, members. We will then go back to item 5, which is the additional site allocations, which Alan is going to present. What I am going to propose, I think we've got 8 to look at altogether, is that at the end of each one, I will take any questions, comments, and ask for a vote on each one individually. That's okay? Right, Alan, thank you. Over to you.
Right, thank you very much. So, the first site we're looking at today, as Sarah mentioned, we did look at some sites in the north of the district, and the first one we looked at was the Fink 2138. So this is land north of the B1053 at Finchingfield. Site was put forward for 47 dwellings, although in theory it could have a capacity of up to about 100. It is adjacent to the development boundary in Finchingfield. Finchingfield is classified as a second-tier village, which does have some local services, including a GP, shop, post office and primary school. It's also quite a popular tourist destination, has a couple of pubs, that sort of thing. The site does have a public right-of-way running through it, and that does connect to the wider public right-of-way network. It also provides some important views towards Finchingfield and the wider area. There is a small strip of flood zone adjacent to the site, however this is probably not significant for this site. The village of Finchingfield itself has numerous listed buildings, including a Grade 1 listed church, as well as a conservation area, but it does have some other constraints such as highways, particularly the narrow bridge on the green. The Parish Council have expressed concerns about the impact on the character of the village, as well as impact on infrastructure and roads. So we're of the view that development on the site would likely have an impact on the rural and agricultural character of the area, as well as impacting on the conservation area, and development in depth would be out of character, as it would represent the first significant development in depth on this part of the village. As such, we're not recommending to allocate the site as per recommendation 1, page 8. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Alan. Right, members, anybody like to make a comment? Councillor Buckland.
In the absence of the 2 local members, as it's part of my county council division, so I know the area very well, I fully support the recommendation of officers.
Thank you, Councillor Buckland. Anybody else? No other comments. Right, members, so that site is not allocated or not recommended for allocation. Would anybody like to move that? Councillor Buckland, yeah?
Yes,
Councillor
will do.
Bowes-Flint, you went second. So could I have a show of hands for not allocating, please? Thank you, members. That's unanimous. Okay. Right, Alan.
Thank you. So this is the next site. This is the largest site, Hat 2193, land north of the A12, Hatfield Peveril. So it's between Hatfield Peveril and Witham. Site is around 56 hectares in size. Theoretically, it could get up to 1,700 dwellings on the site. However, when you consider the likely constraints such as the railway line and the A12, so when talking about constraints, I'm referring to sort of noise and air quality issues, 900 is most likely to be considered more appropriate. So access would be from the A12 B1289 slip roads near Wood End Farm, and from Station Terrace on the B1137 slip roads. I've got a few extra size slides to just show. Apologies. I just should mention the map on the provided with the agenda showed the strategic growth location going all the way up to Witham. We have put together an alternative map for members to consider, which actually shows the buffer going all the way across there, although bear in mind a road would still need to go through that, although policies for green buffers do tend to support the provision of essential infrastructure within the green buffer. So that just thought I'd mention that to members. This is the 800 metre map from the station. As you can see, part of the site is within that, although there would need to be improvements to public rights of way in that area. So the key landscape is going to be a key consideration. It is showing as a green buffer in the prevention of coalescence area in the neighbourhood plan, and if I just apologies, members, get the green. Yes, so this is the extent of the coalescence buffer in the neighbourhood plan, I believe, and as you can see, it's all towards the majority of the site is north of the A12. The coalescence buffer does stretch round south of the A12 as well. So that's, we would still be retaining coalescence buffer between Witham and Hatfield Peveril. The majority of it would remain south of the A12. There are a number of views that have also been identified. Oh, that's a better map, apologies. Yeah, so that's a zoomed in map, just so you can see the buffer as it currently stands in the neighbourhood plan. There we go. Okay. And if we go into the next one, this is the landscape settlement fringe assessment. The area is generally assessed as medium to the east of Hatfield Peveril. There are some low capacity areas around to the south. If we get to the next, and these are some important views that have been identified as well. Notice there are a couple of views that do go across the site, and I believe the neighbourhood plan refers to those as providing long distance views. I think it's to Wickham Bishops, and I think that is a viewpoint from a footbridge over the railway line. Apologies. And that's another landscape showing some additional views. It does identify a couple of views looking north from the A12. There is a footpath that does run along the A12 as well, so that could be a consideration. There is, so what we have here is a potential illustrative layout showing that the majority of the development would be towards the Hatfield Peveril end, set back from the A12 with an alternative road there. The layout was designed with the A12 improvements in mind, so it wouldn't compromise the proposed junction that would be roughly where the roundabout currently is, where it's shown on the map, so it'd be in a similar sort of area. So you could still, if something happened to the A12 in the future, you could still get something in there if you needed to do that. And, yes, there's just another. This is map here is just to show sort of the internal pedestrian type and cycle potential within the site, including routes along the railway line, potentially down to the station. Okay, and they've also been provided with a few sort of ideas as to how sort of the boundary treatment. Obviously, these are very sort of high level ideas. There would need to be a considerable amount of work done to actually make those work. So I think that's the last. That's the last slide for that particular site. So there are obviously some other considerations. So I mean, the parish councils have been included in the report in full, and they have highlighted concerns about infrastructure, and if development were to take place, that they want to ensure that 106 monies are spent within Hatfield Peveril. So we are proposing to allocate the site for around 900, and we're also proposing to identify a green buffer as shown on the map. And yes, so I think just worth noting to members that the next two recommendations, so the next two sites, are also included within this strategic site. So if members are approving recommendation 2, they're also in effect approving the next two recommendations to come forward as part of the wider strategic area. If members do not want to allocate this site as a strategic site, then officers would recommend changing the recommendation for the other two sites to not approve them, as we feel that the two smaller sites, it's more difficult to bring those sites forward separately, and they would both benefit from coming forward as part of a wider development area. It would enable better access to be provided to them. Okay.
Thanks very much, Alan. So it's sort of all or nothing.
Basically, yes.
Right, okay. Right, members. Councillor Coleridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't go over the same comments as the two speakers, but I do think they made really good comments regarding the infrastructure issues and the transport issues that have been raised. I think my biggest issue is the coalescence. Whilst there is a proposed green buffer, when you look at the size of Witham and Hatfield Peveril, and then when you proportionally put that buffer in, it's just not going to be enough. There will literally be no gap between the two communities, and there was always, particularly with the neighbourhood plan, a consideration to prevent that. And I think Councillor Abbott would agree on the other side of Witham that there's serious encroachment towards Rivenhall in a similar sort of vein, and we want to keep these communities away from the major town. And I think we've also seen similar sort of scenarios in Housestead and Braintree where communities around that, those urban areas are, you know, we're trying to protect them from the coalescence. So my recommendation, I was going to say I'd probably say that HATF 2318 and 2194 would actually probably be okay, because they, you know, they're sort of in line with the rest of Hatfield Peveril. But I think 2193 just pushes it way too close to Witham, and I think you'd lose the character of Hatfield Peveril with it. So my suggestion is that we don't approve this application.
Thank you, Councillor. Alan, could you possibly put up the slide, a buffer slide again, maybe? Just. That's all right.
So that shows where the green buffer is proposed to be. So it's so this is the extended green buffer. So it is the green area, the bright green area between Hatfield Peveril and the development at Wood End Farm. So it does stretch across the entire area. This was also, I think this was the area that was also, they were looking at as using as a SUDS area for the A12 as well. But we feel that yes, you would be connecting in effect because of the road, but there wouldn't be any development actually along that road. So if we just go back to the illustrative master plan. Yes, as you can see there, we would have green areas between Whitman and Hatfield Peveril, and there will be a reasonable sized buffer between development and the road. I mean, if
Yes, I was going to say, do you want to come back?
Sorry,
Councillor Rogers?
yeah. Could you show a map sort of zoomed out, so showing Witham and Hatfield Peveril? Because I think that's the important one that shows how close the two communities would be.
That's
Oh, the one before that was
one before that. That one. Yeah.
Right.
I was just going to say, when you look at it zoomed out, and you can actually see where the village of Hatfield Peveril is and Witham to the north, in my view, that there's not going to be enough of a buffer between the two communities.
Okay, right. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got obviously a huge amount of sympathy for Hatfield Peveril in this, but to cut a long story short, Witham's already reached Rivenhall. Phase 2 Bellway basically backs up to houses in Rivenhall, so what we're protecting is a fragment of the green buffer. And the hard story tonight is that if we don't allocate this large site in Hatfield Peveril, not that I would want to on any other day, then we're going to have to go back to Silverend and Cressing again. And I've got a list, and I'm happy to read them out later, of the sites we've not just already got in the village, but have got in the two villages, but have got in the pipeline. Neither of them are key service villages, which Hatfield Peveril is, and one of them doesn't have a railway station. So I think very reluctantly, but I would say with a steer to officers to maximise that buffer as big as we can get it, that in terms of numbers, and unfortunately that's what we're down to now, isn't it?
Yeah.
We are simply down to numbers because of what the government has imposed on us. I don't think we have any alternative realistically if we're going to get the numbers but to allocate this site with that steer. And I have huge sympathy also for what the parish council said, but we're now all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat of peak time congestions. We're all in the same boat of dangerous roads. We're all in the same boat of overstretched services because the higher authorities have let us down. All this talk where this area is going to have so much development, but you'll get all the services you need, you'll get all the upgrades, the roads, the railways, the cycle routes, and none of it's happened. So we are all, unfortunately, in the same boat, and it's down to choosing the least worst, which we shouldn't be in, but I'm afraid that's where we are. So I'm afraid from my perspective, in order to get the numbers, I don't think we've got any alternative but to allocate the site.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. I think I had Councillor Bowers-Flint next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too sympathise with Hatfield Peveril. However, Hatfield Peveril is a key service village, of which another part of Councillor Abbott's ward, Silverend and Cressing, isn't. And I have to say to you, Cressing has joined up with Braintree. There is no buffer. There isn't a footpath has joined up due to failure in bad planning, but we're joined up. There's no two ways about it. We are Braintree now. And that is what is going to happen if you need to provide all these houses. You are going to be joined up with your neighbours. And there's no two ways about it. Unless you're right north of the district, in the back of beyond, where it would be impossible to do that. But unfortunately, we as a local plan committee are faced with these decisions. And they're not easy decisions. They're not nice decisions. And they will always make people unhappy. Always have done, always will do. But we as a committee have to make these decisions to enable us to have a sound local plan to submit to the inspector. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schwer next. I know I've got a number of hands gone up. I will get to everybody. Councillor Schwer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I think making decisions on this committee is never easy, but of course we've got a fundamental duty to the local plan, but also we've got a fundamental duty to sustainability and potentially delivering that infrastructure as well. And although the government have changed considerably what they said they were going to deliver, the location of this site does have a railway station. It also does have the A12. It also has schooling facilities and everything else. And also it is very closely, and it's already been discussed, but it's actually got major service abilities and connections with Whittam and beyond. And with this increase of building in this area, although it is being noted as a key service village, it may well in the future, and we are talking from 31 to 41, also unlock any future government, hopefully the plans to deliver improvements to the A12 and that are desperately needed for this. But also there's going to be improvements to the train service and perhaps the number of trains. And as one of the officers mentioned, the 800 metre of sustainability and the distance and what's available, I think is quite important. And again, it's going to help deliver through larger numbers, delivering that section, that infrastructure that everybody is still wanting for, and it will give sufficient enough of potential development money to deliver more infrastructure to benefit the residents, as in health centres, education, and everything else. And of course, with those increasing numbers, it should trigger a lot of investment into facilities. So a very tough decision, as everybody has mentioned, but I think it would help to unlock what we need with regards to numbers. And as Councillor Abbott met, it's become a little bit of a numbers game, but importantly, I think we need to look at this with the best planning abilities as suggested by officers.
Thank you, Councillor Schwer. I have Councillor Martin next.
Yeah, I would like to recommend approval for this site, please.
Right.
Officer's recommendation.
Okay, just hold that thought, because I'm just going to let others speak and then we'll come back. Right, so next I have Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I find myself agreeing with a number of the members on this committee this evening. It's never easy to add additional housing to already constrained areas, but there are many examples of other areas that are constrained just the same, or in fact have no buffer between two villages. Great Notley, Whitecourt has London Road, so we have an 8-metre road before we reach into Black Notley. We do have to keep in mind that it is a key service village, as stated a number of times by a few members of this committee this evening. And just to the point that Councillor Abbott made about West of Braintree, if it hadn't been for the beaching cuts and there'd been the railway line still there, then I'd fully support there some additional housing growth on that side of West Braintree too, because there'd be the additional transport and infrastructure to be able to support that type of growth there. And obviously, as we know, Hatfield Peveril does have a train station. I think we need to try and remain positive too, just to follow on from the point that Councillor Schreer made. We are just allocating houses to a draft local plan here. It still has to come forward through the planning phase, and through that we can, as local members and members of planning committees, etc., push for the additional infrastructure to support these allocations that are in our draft local plan. This is not a means to an end whereby what's in the plan is what's going to happen without infrastructure. Through the statutory consultee phase, in fact, it would be remiss of them not to consider any additional upgrades to services within some of these developments too. So we need to keep that as a focus point too. And then lastly, in regard to the A12 widening issues, I think the more weight that this local planning authority and other planning authorities add to their local plan around infrastructure, it may just, we hope, give ministers a reason to have a change of heart. We don't know that, but you'd like to think that if they're looking at multiple local plans across multiple LPAs, they might just think sense. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I have Councillor Parker next.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with what a lot of members have said. It's obviously a very difficult decision. I think the main issue here, from listening to the local members, is the issue about coalescence with Whittam, and I would say that's the main issue. The second most important issue is infrastructure, which is in common with probably most other sites. Just on the latter, I would imagine that actually the closest primary school possibly to this site might well end up being the one that's on going to be in the south of Whittam. I've forgotten the name of then it's going to be a new primary school there, I think, isn't there? So hopefully that there would be capacity there. The question I just wanted to ask officers was whether there is any possibility that the number on this site could be reduced or might possibly be able to be reduced during the local plan process to allow for a buffer.
Alan,
I mean, we always state that when we have a site capacity in the local plan, it's always an estimate. The final capacity of the site would likely be determined through the planning application process. When you get to that stage, you've got the detailed plans, you know exactly where your infrastructure is going to go, you know exactly what you need, and you know exactly how many houses you can go on, because you have to have the detailed plans to do it. In terms of reducing it, I mean, I think that's certainly something we can take on board, having a larger buffer and reducing, or potentially reducing the size of the site. The 900 would be over the threshold, I believe, the requirement for a new primary school. But we would obviously be advised by county education for that, and I believe there was a primary school, I think it was at Lodge Farm. So I think there was one included there. So yeah, things at this stage, they are draft plans. The 900 could go down, potentially could go up a little bit, depending on how the site is designed. But we think that the 900 is a reasonable estimate at this stage, although that figure could change subject to more detailed advice. I mean, for example, we don't know exactly how big of a buffer we would need from the railway line for noise, that sort of thing, or stuff like that. So it is a bit of a movable feast in terms of the numbers at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I understand and indeed sympathise with the comments of ward members and indeed the parish council, but as a number of speakers have said, if we don't meet our overall target, our plan may not be accepted or decisions will be imposed upon us. So I think we're under great pressure. My concern is the issue of the A12. I can see why we might, and I think I would go along with a couple of councillors have said, have a slightly smaller number with a larger buffer to relate to the coalescence issue. But on a point of information about the A12, in planning terms, how feasible would be 600 to 900 extra houses here without any widening of the A12? Because we could be in a tricky position approving it without having any indication of the A12. And a number of people have made the point that we need infrastructure with development, not just a hope for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I suspect the answer to that is going to be we need to see what the traffic modelling says, but I'll let officers come back.
That is the right answer. So the preferred spatial option will show the traffic impact. That will go out to Regulation 18 consultation. National Highways will look at that. They will inform their judgments about how bad the impact is to the queues and whether it's unsafe, whether it meets the severe harm test, and they will form a response to the Regulation 18. But also alongside that, we will have ECC looking at potential mitigation options. So it's not going to be the DCO as approved in that form, but there is nothing to say that National Highways wouldn't be looking at other solutions.
Sorry, just on a point of information, but that would be modelling. It wouldn't be any commitments to widening the A12, would it?
Not at this time, but the infrastructure delivery plan will set out what the infrastructure requirements are.
Councillor Monday.
I too have big sympathy for this application. I'd just like to point out, though, that Halstead in this local plan iteration has got some 2,700 plus homes against it, which is going to irreversibly change the town. But it's the only way I see that the town can gain the infrastructure that it needs. So sometimes we have to take these hard decisions, and that was a hard decision for me to take to support that 2,700 set homes.
Thank you, Councillor Monday. Right, we've had a good number of speakers on that. Would anybody like to comment before we go to a vote? No? Right, the recommendation is that this site is allocated. Councillor Martin, were you going to move that recommendation? Yes, does that...
Do you want to do that for 2, 3 and 4?
Ah, right. Members, the suggestion of officers is that we also include in that recommendation 3 and 4 for those 2 sites, as they are part of a package. So I think we will... You're happy with that, Councillor Martin? Right. So could I have a seconder? Councillor Ritchie. Right. Can I have a show of hands for allocating that site's recommendations 2, 3 and 4, please, in favour? Okay, thank you. Against? And abstentions? No, I think that's everybody. Right, thank you, members. Those sites have been allocated. I was just going to wait for that vote before I just said I agree with the comments made. You know, we are between a rock and a hard place here with the numbers that we need to at least present to an inspector next year a plan that shows we're making the numbers. So, right, thank you, members. Okay, Alan, next.
Okay, thank you very much. So, the next site we'll be looking at is Pan F2508. This is land northwest of Panfield Lane. So it's adjacent to the development boundary of the town, and the growth location BOS6H and BOCN 2032. This is the obviously the Panfield Lane growth location. So it does have some public rights of way going through the site, and on to the west there is also a gas pipeline aligned east to west midway through the site. Along this line there is a line of higher risk flooding. However, this should be able to be planned out. Northwest boundaries, there is also another area of high risk flooding from the watercourse. Immediately south there is an area designated as ancient woodland and local wildlife sites, as well as a TPO protected woodland. The site is also adjacent to the Springwood Drive Industrial Estate, and in particular the recycling centre. The area will be considered a extension to existing growth, or the potential existing growth at Panfield Lane. Previously, we did look at this site I think this might be the second time we've looked at this site. However, this site is unlikely to come forward within the first 5 years, but it would be more likely to come forward over a medium to longer term in the plan. So it's likely that once the adjacent site has or starts being developed, then this site can come forward relatively quickly as it's towards the earlier phases on the site. We are currently, I believe Sarah may have an update on the larger Panfield Lane growth location as well, which may provide members with a little bit of background to that if you'd like to have a quick talk about that, Sarah. Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay. I'm happy to assist. So obviously the situation with the Link Road is that there are 2 planning permissions, one for Panfield Lane and one for Towerlands, both restricted by no more than 50 occupations before the Link Road is brought forward. Now the developer that has the land where the Link Road is to be built has not built 50 units. They are not in breach of that limit, but the Towerlands developer is in breach of the 50. But because the road is not on their land, they are not able to build it. So we've been in discussions with how to resolve this, and there is now on the public register a Section 106A application to vary the Section 106 of both applications. And now that is proposing to release the Towerlands developer of that obligation. We're going to make a recommendation on both applications at the same time, but the idea is that the Link Road will, within the Section 106, the updated Section 106, the Link Road will need to be delivered within a period of time. We're just discussing the detail of what that period of time would be. At the moment, we would like 12 months from the date of that agreement being completed. And at that point, there are a couple of other modifications to the Section 106 that they're looking for. They're looking to take the community sports land and provide, rather than provide that land for community sports, they're looking to provide that for, they're looking to provide an off-site mitigation payment rather than the sports land. And they're also looking to no longer pay the employment land contribution because the planning policy has changed since the permission was granted. So I cannot say with any certainty what the outcome of that planning application would be, but and it will be both those applications will be coming forward to planning committee. But if recommended for approval and if granted, it would mean that there would be certainty over the delivery of the Link Road within an agreed period, which officers are hoping will be 12 months from the date of the permission being granted. The reason for uncertainty around that at the moment is because we are working to get an understanding from ECC in terms of the Section 38 agreements, which is the agreement on building the road to adoptable standards, essentially, and that is tricky with Essex Legal Department. But we're working through that, and then from the Dandara side, separate to that, there's going to be an agreement between the developers that Dandara will give a sum of money to Hills and Mersey as their contribution towards the Link Road. So it is hoped that very early in the new year we will be providing 2 applications with a recommendation to committee that will help improve the delivery of the Link Road.
Thank you, Sarah. I think I can speak for everybody when I say that delivery of the Link Road will be a cause for celebration when and if it happens. Right, Alan, sorry, did you have any?
Just some summing up. I think thanks for providing that update on that. I think we probably actually just move straight on to the recommendation, if that's okay. We are recommending allocation.
Recommending allocation, right. Okay, members, anybody? Councillor Parker.
Yes, thank you for the update about the Link Road and also the reference to the possible the amendment, the application to amend the Section 106 to remove the requirement for community centre and put funds in mitigation, which presumably that land would then, as part of the application, would be available for housing, which then leads me to look at this piece of land. And is there any flexibility in the use of this land for something other than, or not entirely for housing?
So what is being proposed, I think, is that they will leave it as sports land, but not necessarily community sports land. But that would be, rather than being mitigation, it would be a benefit to the proposal, because the payment would be enough mitigation. The payment would essentially be comparable to providing 2 football pitches, which is what could be provided on that site. That will change it then to it would just, rather than being community sports land, might be sports land, i.e. some sort of private facility. But that's open to the developer then.
Okay, Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Words fail me over these sites. They really, really do, and I can't say publicly what I truly think. However, I would like to thank the officers of Braintree District Council, i.e. Sarah and Dominic, who have worked extremely hard to try and get an agreement between these 2 developers. And I hope that no other member of this council experiences what we've experienced over this site. Panfield Lane is a really, really busy road. The residents of that road have suffered horrendously. Many of them have had their cars hit several times, in as much as some insurance companies won't even insure them anymore because the traffic is horrendous up there. So all I hope is that the work that the officers have done does come to fruition. If it does, then I can see this going forward. And I understand about the sporting facility, and I'm quite happy with that, to be fair, of what's been agreed with that site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That was very interesting to hear about that it might be moving forward. My question really is around the industrial area nearby and the Braintree Recycling Centre, which I do frequent from time to time, and I think I could just about make out the shape of the actual recycling centre itself. Whilst I'm going to vote for this site, is there any consideration or any legal requirement or regulation that we have to have a standoff from that in terms of noise in particular? I'm just thinking, if you were in a house backing onto the sound of constant bricks being thrown into the brick recycling and glass into the glass recycling, they can be quite noisy. And I know in Cressing, where the 250 houses went through on appeal, that was a consideration, and I fear those residents are going to be suffering at times from the fact that they're right next to a waste transfer station. So I'm just wondering, is there any standoff we need to talk about, or does that come later when we get to detail?
It's a fair point, officers.
It would primarily be a development management constraint, so that would be something that we would obviously consult environmental health on in terms of noise attenuation, that sort of thing, as to what would be needed.
But I agree, I think it would certainly need to be a consideration come the time. Yep. Councillor Ritchie.
I can just add to that, I think there is a private runway strip at the back of that proposed development too, so I'm assuming that would have to be considered as part of that mitigation process also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, anybody else want to comment on that? No. So that site, Panfield 2508, is recommended for allocation. Would anybody like to move something? Councillor Martin, you moving in favour? Second at all? Anybody? Councillor Butland, could I have a show of hands for allocating? I think that's unanimous. Yes, right. Thank you, members. Good. Right, Alan.
This is a slide just for information that actually just shows the 800 metres from Braintree Town, Braintree Railway Station. For if members were interested, we thought we'd put a few more in there just for information. Okay. And we have the one for Freeport there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just in case it came up in the discussion.
Right. Okay.
Right, so the next site is a small site in Ridgewell. This is land south of Chapel Road, Ridgewell. So it is in the north, another site we looked at in the north of the district, which could accommodate about 24 homes. We have reassessed the site in the context of an appeal. The appeal area was slightly different to what was submitted under the call for sites. In that the call for sites shows that there was the possibility of getting a off-road pedestrian connection into the site. However, we've concluded that the site should still not be allocated. The appeal decision on this site was very clear and made a very clear sort of judgment as to what the site did not relate very well to the village, and development in depth would be out of character. So the ability to access the site via footpath does not change any likely impact on the character and appearance of the area. So officers aren't recommended the site as per recommendation 6 on page 15. Thank you.
Right. Any comments, Councillor Parker?
Yes, this site's actually in my ward. I mean, I agree with the officer's recommendations. This has quite a lengthy decision to refuse planning application with quite substantial reasons, and I don't think anything has changed to make us override that.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Right, are you moving that, Councillor?
Yes,
You're
I'll
to
happily
that.
move that.
Councillor Bartlett, you're seconding. Are there any other comments before I go to vote? No, I suspect this is fairly straightforward. Right, that's been moved and seconded. The site is not allocated. Could I have a show of hands, please? Yeah, thank you. Right, good. Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Didn't want to interrupt you.
No.
Right, so next site, STUR 2293. This is land south of Haverhill. It's a strategic level site in the north of the district, adjacent to Haverhill, and could accommodate approximately somewhere between 2,200 and 3,000 homes. The site is not near the A12 or A120 corridors or a main town of the district, although it is obviously adjacent to Haverhill. So officers have met with West Suffolk to talk about their local plan. And they have said that their local plan is subject to an early review. However, the timing of our plan and their plan doesn't align, so we don't really have an opportunity for joint working at this time. So they have advised that the allocation for growth, which wouldn't be comprehensive. So when they say that, they would, if they were going to consider something like this, it would have to be both sides of the boundary as a comprehensive development rather than just one side. And if we didn't pursue the site like that, then we would get the neighbouring authority would be objecting to it. This is the illustrative master plan which was put together earlier this year, just showing where that stretches across the border of the districts there. So we are still not recommending to allocate the site. So there is an inability to achieve a comprehensive development to the south of Haverhill, and there would also be a need to deliver sort of meaningful transport infrastructure as part of this proposal, and as well as there are concerns about landscape impact, that sort of thing.
Right, thank you. Well, we did say we would have a look at sites in the north, and this is one of them. Any comments, members? Councillor Parker.
Well, I'm just going to reiterate really that, I mean, I agree with the officer's recommendation. I don't think we can proceed with this without involving West Suffolk, and actually, to be honest, it's pretty close to Cambridgeshire as well. For that alone, I think it's we can't allocate this. I would say also that it is. You could see from this map here, it would be housing on a rising bit of land overlooking the industrial part of Haverhill, which I don't think is ideal in terms of sort of plan making. To have an industrial, to have a residential area in a different location from industrial sites. the other thing I do seem to remember last time we had this site came before us, I think officers did mention that there had been an objection. I think, am I right in thinking, from Homes England because of the congestion on the A1017 to Cambridge, which is pretty severe?
Yes, your recollection is correct.
Okay, right. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with that. And really, this is a southern extension of Haverhill into Braintree District. And I think it's very different from what we were talking about in terms of sustainable sites in the villages in the north. This is, you know, a strategic size development which would have very significant landscape impact. The only other point I wanted to raise, Madam Chairman, is at that scale, those trees have all got to be giant redwoods, I would think, probably 400 foot plus.
Yeah. Yes. Fine. Okay. Right. Members, anybody got any comments? No. Well, this site is not recommended for allocation. Would that move Councillor Bowes-Flint? Second, close thing between Councillor Monday and Councillor. I'll go Councillor Martin first. Right. Okay. Could I have that's been moved and seconded. Could I have a show of hands that's not allocated, please? Thank you, members. Right, Alan, last one, I think.
Last site, so this is the site land north of Whittam. We have previously allocated about 65, the site for about 65 dwellings. What we were looking at on this site is there is the potential to increase the size of the allocation, potentially without having a huge impact on the sort of the hedges or the trees. We are aware that the site promoter does control a larger area of land other than the allocated orange site or the red site next to it, so there would have also been potential to expand the growth or the allocation outwards further west if we wanted to do that. Generally speaking, we still have concerns about the highways impact, and if I recall, there was the possibility of some minerals through the new minerals, the draft minerals plan was looking at some mineral sites relatively close to that location. So we're not looking to increase the capacity. We would have been looking at going from 65 up to about 225 dwellings, but as it stands at the moment, we think it's an appropriate size allocation in this location, particularly when considering the concerns about highways in the centre of Whittam.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Martin. Yes. Right. Okay. better late than never. Okay. Right. Okay. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, according to my maths, we've got the numbers we need for tonight now. I mean, it may be at some point this comes back, but I think we reached a good compromise at the previous meeting when I suggested we went for part of the site, which gives us some housing, but doesn't have this very significant linear extension into the countryside, plus breaching the hedgerow. But I think in terms of Whittam, as I'm sure the Whittam members, if they were speaking on this, would say, the traffic situation at peak times is getting really acute now. The queuing, mainly southbound in the morning and mainly northbound in the evening, is pretty much every single night during the week. And it's getting worse. And also, this would also add further traffic onto the B1018 northbound. And we're just about to talk about what's happening in Cressing. I mean, we're now getting queuing from Galleys Corner right the way, halfway through Ty Green on a regular basis. Static traffic. It can take 10 to 15 minutes to get from there to Braintree now. So I think it comes back to the discussion we were having about Hatfield Peveril, is we've got these targets coming up against the reality day to day of how people are living. So I think it's right to stick with what we've got on this. It provides some housing, but it doesn't put another big wodge in North Whittam, which adds to those problems.
Yeah. Yes. Good. Okay. No other comments. Right. So the recommendation is that that site is not given a larger allocation than we previously approved. Would somebody like to move that? Councillor Abbott, seconded Councillor Bowes-Flint. Will I have a show of hands on that, please? Thank you, members. We get, for the sake of a couple of minutes, get Councillor Martin back.
It's actually quicker to walk to Braintree now than it is to try and drive.
Yeah, I know. Well done. Thank you, Alison. That's the end of your item, isn't it, Alan? So actually, members, that finishes the agenda item this evening because we have no urgent business. Very good discussions and debates, thank you. So I can actually close the meeting at 7:55, which is very good going. Thank you very much indeed, and good night to everybody. Thank you.